special edition of Flow Hub, and trust me, it's been a wonderful journey. When you want to master any language generally, there are some key things you must master, and one of them is how to say things in the past. Ideally, when we speak in languages, whether English, French, whatever language, we have a way of saying things in the present, how to say things in the past, and also in the future, among other nuances of languages. In the context of today's interaction, we are focusing on what we call the passé composé, the past tense in French. Now, the passé composé in French is so important in the sense that you can hardly do quite a lot if you don't master it. So we're going to be looking at basically like 6 to 7 different things. Number one, the formation of the passé composé. Number two, the distinction on the usage of the auxiliaries. Number three thing we're going to look at is uh, how to derive the past participle for each of the verb. The fourth thing we're going to see is going to be the agreement of the past participle and the direct object for avoir, and then the subject pronoun for être as it were. So let's go quickly. For a start, understand that the past composé in French is a compound tense, meaning we make use of two things for that. The first one is called the auxiliary of the verb être and avoir, and then we have what we call the past participle. The question now is, how do we derive the past participle? The first thing to note is when a verb ends in ER in French, just as you have on your screen, a verb ends in ER. Yeah, this is ER verb. Example of that is the verb parler. We remove the ER and then we put E as something due to get a past participle. For IR verb, remove the IR as in fini to get it, and then we have fini here. And then for ROE verbs, we remove the ROE and then it becomes you as in respond and répondu. This is the first thing to take note of, how to derive the past participle. There are quite other verbs that you cannot derive the past participle from the infinitive. Either you can just memorize them. We're going to see some lists as we go ahead. But right now, let's come back. The first thing to note again is that for every verb in French, we use avoir. Yeah, I repeat, we use avoir as their auxiliary. Avoir is used as the auxiliary to conjugate all the verbs in French with their past participle to give you the past tense. The only exceptions to that is what we call the intransitive verbs and the reflexive verb. So when we say we use the auxiliary avoir to conjugate the past participle, what do we mean? Look at this verb parler. Now in this parler, as you can see on your screen right now, I just highlighted it. You have j'ai parlé. What we did that we wrote avoir in the present tense. We remove the er for the parler and then put the e as something due. We now have what we call the past participle. Add it together with the present tense of the verb avoir. What we have is the result you see there, which is our passé composé. J'ai parlé, tu as parlé, il a parlé, elle a parlé, on a parlé, nous avons parlé, vous avez parlé, ils ont parlé, elles ont parlé. So you could see this. The same thing applies to fini here. As you can see, j'ai fini, tu finis, il finit, elle finit. This is what I'm talking about. This same thing applies to this. Now, when you come to the next one, the arrow is there. We have répondu, j'ai répondu, tu as répondu, and so on and so forth. Outside this, understand again that when you just conjugate a verb, that's in the positive case. We have what we call the negative form. You put the no before the auxiliary and the pas after the auxiliary. And then before you add the past participle, you have je n'ai pas parlé, tu n'as pas parlé, as you can see there. As you continue for interrogation, those who have been following our lectures, we've dealt with some videos on that. You can go back to the channel Flow Up, of course, subscribe and watch it. We have for interrogation, est-ce que j'ai parlé? You just put the est-ce in front of it, becomes a question. For inversion, that's where the trick is when you're doing inversion. For the inversion, you bring the auxiliary first before the subject pronoun, and then you now add a past participle. And so you have something like as-tu parlé? Look at this list there. As-tu parlé? A-t-il, a-t-elle parlé? So you can have or does. So as we go over, these are the irregular verbs I told you about. For these ones, you cannot form their past participle from their infinitive. You just got to master them. Look at how voir becomes you, boire becomes bu, and then you have verbs like conduit becoming conduit, produit become produit. You have connect, connu, and then you have courir as couru, croire is cru, devoir is due, dire is dit, dormir is dormi. So in a nutshell, you just got to master them as you can see. So this is a list of them. I'm scrolling now, so you can pause your screen and take a look at them and get to master them. They're very important. We use them regularly in French. Now look at an example of an irregular verb, which is the faire in this context. The verb faire, which is to do, faire, to make, or to do. Now we put the avoir first, and then we added the past participle, which is the faire. The participe passé, we added to it. J'ai fait, tu fais, il fait, which is I did, he did, you did, and so on and so forth. So that is on that ground. Now for the verb être, in passé composé, j'ai été, we also use the verb avoir for the verb être to get the past. C'est composé. J'étais, j'ai été, I was. Tu as été, you were. So that is for that. So you want to take note of all this. So avoir is used to conjugate the past tense of all verbs except intransitive verbs and of course reflexive verb or call them verb pronominal, which we're going to see very briefly. Now, as you come to avoir as well, there are some verbs that have special meaning. Now, look at this list of verbs here. The verb savoir, for example, the verb savoir from record, savoir actually means to know. But when it's used in the passive composite, it means to find that, find that. And last you call ce matin, she only found that this morning. We have connect is to meet. J'ai connu, instead of to know, it now means to meet somebody. Pouvoir, instead of to be able, that means could. We have grâce as a taunt in a preface is a tude of cons. You get it now. Ne pas pouvoir means failed. Now you say, okay, I failed to do something. You're gonna be, okay, je n'ai pas pu, je n'ai pas pu le joindre. I could not reach him. As you look at the verb vouloir, of course, vouloir means to want, ordinarily in the present. But when used in the passive composé, it could be used as to mean refuse or to try to do something. J'ai voulu parler avec les. I tried to speak to her. And then you have je n'ai pas voulu lui dire mon adresse. I refuse to give him my address. So these are key things to note. So let's delve more into it. It's getting interesting, I believe. So we're going to call agreement. Yes, this is where the French is a killer. When you conjugate with avoir, we do not have agreement within the subject pronoun and the past participle. However, the agreement comes when we have a direct object before the verb. Let's take, for example, as you can see, we have a direct object now. Il nous a reconnu. Reconnu on an ID day will not have S. It's going to be il a reconnu generally. But because this nous, which happens to be a direct object, is there, of course, nous is there, direct object, so we got to work with that. The S comes to play because of the nous that we have there. The S comes to play. That's what we have there. Nous have this. We have attribute la pièce, je l'ai vu. You see this view here taking the extra E. That because of this la here, representing this la pièce in this context. So when you have a direct object before the verb in passive composite, it agrees. When you have the relative pronoun, of course, representing the direct object, we have that. Interrogative adjective, of course, like curly, like pronouns, you're going to have definitely agreements. When you have exclamatory adjectives, if it's feminine, like quelle chance elle a eu, as you can see right now, quelle chance elle a eu, you are going to have that. You have combien de photos, for example. Combien de photos avez-vous prises? Photo is feminine, if not, is vous avez pris on the nomadé. But because the photo is coming before it now, we now have prise, es. So when you have the direct object before the verb, in passive composite, trust me, you got to make the agreement. So, but any other thing, if it's an indirect object, you don't need an agreement for that, and then you can simply pass by. Now we come to the second part of passive composite, the one that I conjugated with the verb être, passive composite. This is what we call the intransitive verbs. I've been talking about it in the course of this interaction. For the intransitive verbs, there is a list of them. We have aller to go, venir, venir, arriver, partir, sortir, entrer, monter, descendre, naître, mourir, passer, rester, go, tomber, and tomber. After that, they are brothers like rentrer, devenir, and revenir. These verbs express what we call change of state, as in mourir to be born, or mourir to die, or naître to be born. So verbs that talk about change of state and movement, we use the verb être as their auxiliary in forming the passive composite for those verbs. Look at the example here, the verb aller. Je suis allé, tu es allé, il est allé, elle est allée. But mind you, here is the tricky thing about this whole thing. Now, whereas for conjugation of with avoir, we do not have agreement. Here, we don't need direct object first of all. When you have this, you see, there are agreements here. Extra e, extra e, extra e. This extra e here is compulsory. So there is agreement. You must agree in number and in gender. So that is what you take note of when you are dealing with the verb être. You must take note of all those agreements generally. It's important and you can't run away from them. Now, beyond uh, those, among those intransitive verbs, there are about 6 of them that actually could go with alpha and et. Why? Because whereas the other, because they can take a direct object. Look at the verb monter, descend, sortir, rentrer. We have retourner and passer. Look at the examples down here. We have, for example, in this comparison, as you can see on your screen there, je suis monté. When you say je suis monté, when you say je suis monté in this context, je suis monté. The action is on the person, au premier étage, and there is no direct object in that sentence. We have J monter l'escalier. Number one, l'escalier is a direct object, and the action is on the staircase. So we have avoir. So when there is a direct object in the sentence, in the construction, we use avoir for those 6 group of verbs. When there's no direct object, of course, we use the verb être. So you have il a monté le taxi, the person here. We have il a monté la valise. The action is on the what? Direct object there. Ils sont descendus, that is, of course, on the person. Ils ont descendu la rue, the action is on the street. So that is the key difference when you are dealing with avoir and être with those 6 verbs in terms of which one goes with which for passive composite when you are conjugating. Now, that aside, you can see more practical examples. Look at, for example, number 1. À quelle heure est-elle rentrée? There's no direct way is est here. But for the next one, we have la voiture become est-ce que tu as rentré? So avoir, we go for the second one. Number 3, we have être, going for that, est retourné. Le vent, le bateau is that we have a retourné because of the bateau there. So these are examples to take note of. The last section of passive composite conjugation has to do with what we call the reflexive verbs. Yeah, reflexive verbs. For reflexive verbs, we call them verb pronominal as well. We could have verb pronominal réfléchi and réciproque. What's the difference? You can share some of our videos, but I'll wrap it up this way. When an action is carried out by a subject on itself, that action is reflexive. We call it réfléchi. But when I carry out an action on a friend, my friend repeats that same action on me, that action is called reciprocal. So for all construction that have to do with verb pronominal réfléchi, definitely you have the agreements over the agreements carried out, as you can see, for every verb else. So, but whether it is reciprocal or réfléchi, else is going to be used for their passive composite. But the difference is that once it's reciprocal, as you're going to find now very soon, once it's reciprocal, you are going to discover that there is no agreement. If it's not reciprocal, as you see in this essai souvenir, ils sont allés, there's agreement. But come down now, we have essai lavé. Essai lavé, essai lavé, we have it as réfléchi. There's agreement there. But look at the next sentence, which is this now. The next sentence, this particular one, where I'm just highlighting. Elle s'est lavé les chevaux. Now, in this, elle s'est lavé les chevaux, There's what we call a direct object. So because of that le chauffeur, the so now begin to now act as an indirect object. So we now have no agreement. So after the lave, no agreement there. Now for the verb pronominal reciprocal, which I've mentioned earlier, we have ils se sont téléphonés. Now téléphoner is I call somebody, the person called me, we are calling ourselves, so they are calling themselves. So it's a reciprocal action. So the S in that telephone is missing. We didn't put the S, though it's plural. That's because it's a reciprocal action. So there's no agreement. Though we use the verb être because it's pronominal in nature as well. For essai demander, same thing applies there. There is no agreement. So these are the basic things to note when you are using verbs in passive composite. The next question is that when and how should we use it? It's called the uses of the passive composite. Number one, when an action happened at a precise moment in the past. Yes, it's a precise moment, a specific time, a day, a time, whatever, a year, within a limited period of time, and that the action takes place, especially with all these markers of time like so matin, ye soir, and so many of them as we have in French. You can see on the screen now. We have la nuit dernière, le matin. These are markers of time. So when something happens at a precise time, we use passé composé. We use passé composé to make that kind of action. Example, we have elle s'est arrivée il y a 15 jours. Elle est arrivée il y a 15 jours. She arrived about 2 weeks ago. Le réveil a sonné à 7 heures. The alarm bell goes off around 7 o'clock. So there is a precise time for all these actions, a precise time for the actions. That's why we use passive composite. Number two, when something happened just once, yes, it happened just once and it's in the past, for example, we use passive composite. Example is to die, to die, to get married, to get engaged, of course, to divorce. Those are things that normally happen once in a lifetime, except for now that we have some which are not the norm, but people get married over and over again. But ideally, these are things that happen once in a lifetime. So those kind of actions we use passive composite. Look at the verb mourir, the verb net, the verb se marier, and the verb those verbs like that we use. Look at them now. Mourir, yeah, we have mourir, we have net, we have se marier. Then we have elle est morte, we have il est né, we have mes parents ont divorcé. You get it now? Ils se sont mariés. So we use the verb être in this context, things that happen just once. Now, an action that is repeated, that is where it's specified, precise, appropriate number of times. Now, look at this sentence now. For number three, we can see we have, for example, elle est allée 3 fois. This marker of time, that's why we must use passive composite. 3 fois chez le dentist. So it went to the dentist 3 times, but there's a specific time frame there. Now, when something happens, short duration, sudden occurrence, and we have words like sudden, Sudan, tout d'un coup, immédiatement, tout de suite, so on and so forth. When you have this kind of actions, short duration, good, of course. We use passive composite for them. We have example, elle a ouvert la porte. Elle a ouvert la porte. J'ai rencontré un ami convive. Soudain, j'ai eu peur. Suddenly, I'm frightened. I got scared. Nous avons tout de suite prévenu la police. We immediately informed the police. These are actions that happen suddenly. We use passive composite for these kind of actions. And of course, at times you have series of things happening, like what I do in the morning, what I do. Okay, I wake up in the morning, je me suis levé, je me suis lavé, levé, et puis je me suis poussé les dents, je me suis lavé, et après, so we have words like d'abord, puis, ensuite, après, alors, just to show us the series of events, what it does. In the past, we use passé composé. So these are various things to note when you come to passive composite. If you have watched thus far, I want to say very big, wonderful congrats to you. You are doing so great. And here at Flow Up, we look forward to having you more. So enjoy the rest. Watch over again. Share with your friends. Subscribe to the channel. We'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.